And remember, we've got rules and regulations. Yes, rules and regulations for 21st Century Radio. We require jackets and ties for all men. And women have to wear crenolines and 7-inch heels and have to have Tonys. You got to wear all of those things, friends. It's no smoking, too. You can't smoke. Rules and regulations. And we have further rules and regulations. What are they? Now I know you know what they are. First of all, we are not alone in the universe. Repeat after me. We are not alone in the universe. That's right. And never have been. No, we never have been. There's a lot of folks out there. They're not even in physical bodies. They're all over the place. They're all over the place right here. You see them in my studio. Now, that's number one. Number two, rules and regulations, is that what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, probably not to some of our skeptical friends in Psychical. They don't necessarily feel that we even have global warming yet. Well, they'll catch you on. They'll catch you on. And finally, human beings are not machines. Have you noticed that? It's true. Yeah, well, there might be a few. I can think of a few. Yes. However, all human beings come with an immortal ingredient. Ingrediments, as they used to say on Jack Benny's show. Jack Benny. Ingrediments. And you can call it spirit, you can call it soul, you can call it whatever you want to, but it's immortal. Now you got you're qualified now to listen to 21st Century Radio, and it's free. Absolutely free, except for us. Yes, we make sure we have to get paid. Well, we don't get paid, but we pay. All right. Now that we got all these rules and regulations ready, I'm going to give you some information about the book that we're going to talk about the entire 2 hours. We seldom do this, friends. But this is an important work. It's called The Parapsychology Revolution. It reminds me of, who's that guy who played Reds in the movie Reds? Well, this is a revolution, friends. It's ongoing. It ain't stopped yet. America is actually in the middle of a revolution. It is a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. It's a compilation and commentary by Dr. Robert Schoch. Dr. Robert Schoch has joined us maybe about 427 times. And this is written with, now this is going to be tough, Logan Yonaviakon. No, I didn't get it right. No, my producer, is it Yonavjak? No? Yak? Close enough, she says, but I got no cigar. Got no Corona on that one. All right, friends. Well, we'll check that out a little later on. But let me give you some information that you can find on the back of this book because they did a real good job. This is Tarcher Penguin. These are friends that, remember Jeremy Tarcher, who used to join us on 21st Century Radio? Well, it says, grounded in scientific acumen and constructive inquiry, this anthology shines a rare, clarifying light on the controversial realms of psychical and paranormal research, collecting key reports, essays, and arguments from more than a century of investigation into matters such as clairvoyance, telepathy, and poltergeist activity. Now, what does our dear friend Dr. Sally Ryan Feather, have to say about this? Here's what she says. Quote, a remarkably comprehensive overview with a broad study of the paranormal, tied together by balanced and thoughtful commentary, a must-read for the serious student of the paranormal and open-minded skeptic alike. That was Sally Ryan Feather. I imitated her voice. You may have noticed that. Now, who is this alleged Dr. Robert M. Schoch? Well, he is a full-time faculty member at the College of General Studies at Boston University since 1984. That's a previous incarnation from Texas. I just popped in there. Me and Willie Nelson hanging down there. He earned his Ph.D. in geology and geophysics at Yale University. Wow! I wonder if he's a member of Skull and Bones. Well, we'll find out in just a few minutes. He is the author most recently of Pyramid Quest, a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Now, Logan I'm not even going to attempt the last name pronunciation because I must have got it wrong, or my producer would have said something. Logan has been active with the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina, the nation's premier facility for studying the paranormal. And I'm going to say hello to Logan first. Logan, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Have I embarrassed you enough, Logan?
No.
No, I haven't. Now, can you
almost got my last name right.
Almost?
Yes.
Okay, would you pronounce it for us, please?
Yonavjak.
Of course, Yonavjak. I knew that now. And is this Dr. Schoch? Is he still there?
I'm here.
How have you been, Bob?
Good. Good to hear your voice.
And your pitching arm's doing well? You ready for the upcoming series?
Oh, I guess so.
You guess so. You better really get yourself in shape. With a book like this, you're going to get yourself in trouble, Bob.
Oh.
Well, you've never been
I feel like I've done that before.
Yeah, I noticed that. Another lifetime, I imagine. Not in this lifetime, though, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, well, this is an important book, friends. And that's the reason why we decided it was important to have them on for both hours. That's unusual these days. Now, Robert, what have you been doing lately before we get into this book?
What have I been doing besides?
What have you been doing?
Well, how should I say it? I don't want anyone to think that I've forgotten about the Sphinx and the pyramid and Egypt and ancient ruins and all that type of stuff. So I continue with that. We're trying to get a group of geologists together. You remember John Anthony West.
How could I forget Uncle John?
Exactly. How could you forget him at all?
Oh.
No one could. We're working on getting a panel of geologists together to continue the studies of the Sphinx and the redating of the Sphinx, that type of thing. And I continue to be interested in ancient monuments around the world, so I continue that research. In fact, I think that ties right in with the research on parapsychology.
Why is that?
Well, because what I found, something that I was asking myself, I found myself wondering about for years, looking at the Great Pyramid, looking at other ancient structures, is what is the purpose of these? And, the Great Pyramid, we've talked about this before, it's certainly not just a big glorified tomb.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's
No,
ridiculous.
of course it is. That's all it has.
Right.
That's all it ever has been.
Yeah,
Logan, you believe that, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
No, I'm talking to Logan now. Logan, it was just built for one vainglorious photo. I called it almost Pharaoh.
Right, that's exactly it.
That's all there was to it.
Yeah. Now you got to understand, she's been there with me, so.
Well, then that's a problem in itself,
That's
because you probably now her reputation is now besmirched. I can see I can see some of my friends over there. God bless Zahi Hawass and those other folks.
He knows the truth.
He knows the truth, and I had to deal with him back in 1980. You can imagine what.
I can imagine. Absolutely.
That was and thank heavens it was Anwar Sadat that introduced us. If it weren't for that, I think I would have gotten in all kinds of trouble. All right, now let's.
Anyway, looking at all these ancient structures around the world, getting serious now. The question is, what are they being used for? What's going on? And so many of them, I'm convinced, have at least something to do with rituals, initiation, what we might say in modern terms, altered states of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So you can see where that ties in with, really looking into the paranormal and psychical research.
Well, I'm so glad you went into this area because I've always loved the quality of research that you've done.
Thank you.
It's really you've made major differences in various areas, and I'm just so surprised that no, I guess I shouldn't be, because Egypt moves. They don't move slowly. They just don't move. I mean,
they just don't move. Yeah. Modern Egypt.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate in this research. We would have thought back in 1992, 1993, 1994, 5, etc. that they would have really discussed this issue and. Without trying to BS us, but unfortunately, I'm afraid they can't.
Right. Yeah, 10, 15 years ago, we never thought, how should we say, this little progress would have been made.
That's right.
On that front.
But I bet you Logan thought so. Right, Logan? Didn't you feel it almost right away?
Sorry, what?
I said, don't you think that the progress in the area of research into the monuments in Egypt is going especially slow?
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that it's been so slow, and it seems pretty obvious to me that the Sphinx was built much earlier than previously imagined by by Egyptologists. So.
Well, it's time to get pretty serious about this area called parapsychology and the paranormal, because as soon as I'm saying something like paranormal and parapsychology, I can see, I'm used to seeing into people's minds these days, of course, Bob, and I can see there's a group over there in Hamden that's saying, yep, now Bigfoot, aliens,
right, exactly.
and our friends in Glen Burnie now are saying, yeah, it's all about UFOs.
Yeah.
And such, but let's find out what we really mean when we talk about the paranormal.
Yeah, what we really focus on in this book, and I'll let Logan chime in a second too. We really focus on classic, genuine, what I would call genuine paranormal phenomena, and the core of that is essentially the modern term is telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, interaction, without the use of the known senses. So telepathy related to that clairvoyance, premonitions, that type of phenomena. Sometimes those are referred to as mental phenomena within the psychical or paranormal realm. And then the other aspect is mind over matter issues, referred to as psychokinesis or PK for short. And really within that category, PK, is micro PK, for instance, the long time studies at places like Princeton, the PAIR laboratories, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratories, which unfortunately just closed down.
Yeah.
But that was a funding issue, and that had nothing to do with the research per se. It had to do with other issues. But the micro PK studies on random event generators, on dice tossing in a more macroscopic scale, but things like that. And then the other aspect is macro PK and very well documented cases of poltergeist incidents, which both of us were very skeptical about at first. I have to admit I've witnessed a minor poltergeist incident myself since I got involved in this research.
That'll convince you, all right.
That will convince you, but there's very, very good documentation of poltergeist incidents, and also not just that they occur, but they occur with regular patterns.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the incidence of occurrences drop off, as one would expect, with distance from the person that seems to be the center of the activity. So again, one thing that I found, and I'll let Logan make a comment in a second, is that, when you start sorting out the fraud, you start sorting out all the nonsense, you get down to the core, genuine, I'll call it paranormal phenomena, there are regularities, there are patterns that make sense. Now, it might be outside the bounds of normal science, but that doesn't mean there aren't patterns and regularities.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to add, Logan?
Well, I guess generally parapsychology and paranormal and psychical research have had so many things lumped into them that people think of Bigfoot and they, immediately associate that with paranormal or parapsychology. So I think Dr. Schoch did a good job explaining ESP and PK, and psychical research. The term psychical research is more usually associated with some of the earlier studies, which we'll get into later, that the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research, started studying back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, and parapsychology was actually thrown in as a term around the 1930s with J.B. Rhine when he tried to take out survival research and just focus on ESP and PK. And then in the 1940s, the term psi was actually used by Sue Less and Wiesner to describe ESP and PK under a general category. So instead of using parapsychology, it's just another confusing term, but it's psi. So you'll hear us refer to all of those terms as we talk.
Yeah, and I also would add in that some things that people call paranormal, like Bigfoot, that's really a whole different category, sometimes referred to as cryptozoology, more or less. There's nothing particularly paranormal about a Bigfoot. If we should in the future capture a Bigfoot, it's just a new species, a previously unknown species.
Well, I have always liked the work of Dr. Grover Krantz in this particular area, and unfortunately he passed on more recently.
Yeah.
And I think if he'd still be alive, that area would continue to grow and develop, of course, along with Lauren Coleman and others who have done terrific jobs. And,
exactly.
And that type of thing. Now, we're going to take a break here. And when we return, we're going to find out a little bit about why you guys decided to put your necks on the chopping block here, because there really is when I talk about these kind of things with my friends at Hopkins and elsewhere, they're still living in 1946, some of them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so we'll find out why you're doing that, and I'm glad you are. With our guest, we're going to call him. This is the Bob and Logan Show here on 21st Century Radio, and the book is called The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research by Tarcher Books. Please go to robertschoch.com, spelled Robert, SCHOCH, SCHOCH.com, or go to 21stcenturyradio.com and click on this week's show at the top right-hand corner. We're righties.
Hello, this is Ingo Swann, the author of Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy. And you're listening to the wonderful 21st Century Radio with the amazing Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
Well, hey, this is 21st Century Radio. It really is. I'm what's left of Dr. Bob Hieronymus in this incarnation, and Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. Did I get it right? I hope I did. Yes, the Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research, Tarcher Books. And please go to the website, robertschoch, SCHOCH.com. Now, we touched on this a little bit about why you became interested in doing this book, particularly going out on a limb and putting a book on this particular subject. And you know, friends, as I've said before, and this is kind of shocking in itself, there are Americans that think the Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, and the American Eagle are all satanic. Did you hear me? This is true. Now, if they think that these things are satanic, imagine what they're going to think of the paranormal. Well, how would you like to begin this, Robert?
Well, I guess there's several sort of lines of why I got involved with this, and then I'll let Logan comment on her involvement. But one is it ties in my mind, very clearly with the ancient monuments, and I think, to be blunt, some of the ancient monuments, at least, were being used to, should we say, almost as machines, and I hate to use that term, but it comes to mind at the moment, to sort of increase the probability of paranormal phenomena, or sort of to induce paranormal phenomena. And I'm talking in terms of ritualistic practices, initiation rites, that type of thing, where I think there was a component when you start looking at the ancient literature, like the Egyptian literature, the little that we have survived, that supports this. So I became very interested in it from that point of view, because, was this just something that they were saying, or could there be some reality to it? Also, I have a degree in anthropology at undergraduate level, and even when I was saying anthropology, among indigenous traditional cultures and societies, you keep seeing what seem to be paranormal phenomena popping up. These are generally just dismissed by modern academics as, they're hallucinations, they're delusions, but I always had this nagging feeling, well, could there be something to it? And then I have to give Logan credit. She really got me looking at this further. And we've talked about this before in other contexts. I like to try to be someone that if I'm looking into something, I call it the way I see it. And I start looking into this whole business of the paranormal and parapsychology. Honestly, going into it, I was incredibly skeptical. But I have to admit, there's something to it. At least I'm convinced there's something to it. And not only is there something to it, but it's non-trivial. I think it's incredibly important and really expands our view of the world, our view of the cosmos, our view of what it means to be human. So
yeah, I
to
think
me it's important enough. You have to stand for what's sort of true.
Well, Logan, so you pushed Uncle Bob here into a tough between a rock and a hard place. Is this correct?
Well, he did have tenure, so he had a little more. He was a little more liberal of what he could publish and what he couldn't. But yeah, I came across a book. Actually, it was given to me by my mother. It was called The Field.
Oh yes, McTaggart.
Yeah, I was really impressed by it, and to be honest, I had not really thought about parapsychology at all throughout most of my adult life. Until I came across this book and really I read it and was really intrigued and decided to present it to Dr. Schoch just to see what he thought about it. And he had the idea to do some research and see if we could get something published just in terms of a survey of what had been done, just kind of as an exploratory project, but also just because he thought other people might be interested. And he was at liberty to do so. Like I said, he had some flexibility just because of his position. And I also started thinking back, and my dad actually took me to several events at the Rhine Center in Durham, which was affiliated with Duke University back in the 30s. Dr. J.B. Rhine is kind of touted as the father of modern parapsychology. He was largely responsible for the experimental work that was started in the 30s, but that institute is in Durham, North Carolina, and they're actually still operating. And he took me to several paranormal support group sessions when I was younger, and I had forgotten about them. But once I started talking to Dr. Schoch about parapsychology, it kind of and I started talking to my dad. He kind of brought up that we'd already had some experiences together, and he'd taken me some of those talks. So anyway, that's kind of how I got interested, and I initially was very skeptical as well, and just upon reading some of the research that's been done, I have to say there's so many interesting implications for what these topics mean for what it means to be human and what our boundaries really are with one another and with potentially other organisms and the cosmos and whatnot. So it's a very fascinating field.
Oh, it is fascinating. I remember when I was a Lord Bertrand Russell light, and I was a logical positivist back in the old days, I used to laugh at this. I thought this was the funniest stuff in the world. I thought it was one of those rubber crutches. I mean,
Exactly. Well, that's how we were trained.
Yes, indeed. I was trained like a good animal.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to. And then when I had a poltergeist experience, the same as probably a little different than Bob's.
Yeah.
But when a candlestick on my table that was sitting in the middle of the table moved itself and fell off the table, and I was the only person up in this rat trap of a study. And I'm sure the rats didn't jump on the table and carry it off.
Right.
And I was in the bathtub when all this happened.
Wow.
It changed my life.
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden. Of course, I've went to other psychologists and psychiatrists. They thought, Hieronymus, what the hell's wrong with you? So, so this is a really important area in regards to a number of things. And of course, there has been over the past 100 or so years some serious study of it, and it's there at times. There has been some fraud in this research, and that's one of the good things about this book, friends. They don't dodge the issue that there have been or has been some fraud in these areas. But what is the history of the serious study of the paranormal?
Well, the serious study actually goes back to the 19th century. I mean, people were interested in including, you can trace serious individuals that were trying to look at the paranormal back to at least the 17th century. But, you also had the concept of witches and, everything else was going on. So it's very confused. But the modern research in the paranormal really goes back to the founding of the Society for Psychical Research in 1882. And this was a group of very well-educated men and women in England who founded the society in 1882, specifically to look at what we now call paranormal phenomena. They usually used the term psychical at the time, and these were, well-educated philosophers, physicists, humanists, lawyers, theologians, et cetera, I mean, a very elite group. And the Society for Psychical Research still is in existence, still is carrying on its work, still publishing the journal and the proceedings. And one thing we looked at was their early work in the first few decades of their existence the late 19th, early 20th century, and it's amazing how the quality of the work they were doing. They were applying statistical studies to paranormal phenomena. They were carrying out experiments. They were documenting cases of paranormal phenomena, what we would call spontaneous cases, and not taking things on faith. They were not just accepting anything that came along. In fact, they were accused in their history many times, and still are accused of being, quote, skeptics, because they won't accept just any old story about paranormal phenomena. That has to really be well documented, but they've documented now in over 125 years of existence an incredible number of very well documented cases, and also carried out very good lab research, or sponsored very good lab research.
Logan, I do believe there was not that I do believe, I know for a fact that there were some areas in which there were, what do you call it, fraud, that this particular group, SPR, focused on and weeded out. Can you tell us about just one?
Well, I would actually defer that question to Dr. Schoch. He spent more time researching the earlier work, so I would actually...
One thing that Logan, you should pick up in a second with the Rhine. You mentioned them a little bit, but one thing that was happening was that a lot of the early work was tied in with seances, old classic 19th century style seances. Mm-hmm. It turned out that many of these were absolutely abysmal from a scientific point of view. And what you get is blatant fraud in some cases. And they exposed many cases of blatant fraud. And one group in particular, one clientele, should we say, that was very interested in the whole what we now call paranormal phenomena, were the classic spiritualists. And they were quite upset when some of their prime spiritualists, channelers, we might call them now, were exposed as frauds. But in other cases, they found that certain mediums, they could be studied very carefully, and the phenomena were genuine. And then you get into a gray area, and this has been typical for certain types of phenomena and certain individuals who seem to possess, should we say, paranormal gifts or powers, is that in some cases they seem to be real, but in other cases the same individual is not above committing fraud, which has been a perplexing problem, and is probably I think a deep-rooted psychological problem in the field when you start relying on particular individuals that seem to have paranormal powers, which is one reason that a lot of serious studies have gone to looking at spontaneous cases among, quote, ordinary people, or looking at laboratory work. And Logan, maybe talk a little bit about J.B. Rhine, because he was really, he had some very bad experiences with mediums.
In fact, one of the first things that Rhine did when he became interested in studying paranormal phenomenon is he went to a few of the seances and actually wanted to see firsthand the work that some of the mediums were doing. And one of his first experiences, and the name of the medium escapes me, but...
Marjorie.
Yes, Marjorie.
Yeah.
Exactly. He actually... when he went to witness the event, he thought it was a blatant problem of fraud, and actually refused to admit that refused to say that he thought something legitimate was going on. He actually thought it was fraudulent, and that actually caused some rifts within the spiritualism community, and they all, expected him to bow down and say, well, that it was legitimate, and he refused to do so. And he actually took that experience, and it propelled him into wanting to try and bring parapsychology into the laboratory and just focus on what he thought could be studied objectively, and what he thought to be objectively with the card-guessing experiments and other forms of experiments that he developed based on his experiences with fraud. So he actually took those very seriously, and was very quick to expose fraud when he came across it several times. that happened in his laboratory, where one example was an experiment with a man named, a researcher named Smith, who was found, actually had messed with some of the experimental data, and had 20 years later it was one of the touted pieces of evidence for telepathy, and it turned out that it was fraudulent, and Ryan immediately reported it, even though it didn't look good for his lab. So,
well, obviously.
Yeah, one thing I'd point out is a lot of the skeptics, they'll pick up on one or two cases of fraud in the field and try to dismiss everything. But in fact, I mean, to put it bluntly, you have fraud in every field. The medical field is...
how can you say that?
Oh, yeah, right.
Robert, I mean, come on.
I know. I'm really going out on a limb here. I'm really going out on a limb here.
Those pharmaceutical companies wouldn't ever attempt.
No, never. They only have our best interest in mind.
Yeah, and they certainly aren't going to charge us. They'll only charge us what's really necessary for the creation. I know.
Exactly. But as Logan just pointed out, it's really been, despite what certain skeptics and debunkers want to try to claim, it's really been the parapsychologists and the researchers of the paranormal themselves that have been the ones that have weeded out fraud among their ranks, have been the first to point out fraud. One thing I found is that among serious researchers, there's a very strong level of integrity, and they're not afraid to call it the way they see it. And when they see fraud, even if it looks bad for themselves, they'll call it.
Well, that's called integrity, and of course that's what you're supposed to do in the scientific method.
Exactly. I would say, after studying and being involved with different aspects of science, I mean, I'm impressed that the parapsychological community, from the beginning, from the 1880s on, really is following what people think of as the ideal of the scientific method. Yet it's such a controversial issue.
Well, it's going to
people that they just won't look at the evidence.
You think it's tough in this area? You should get to the area of UFOs.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they're you just say that, and people are just going to lock you up.
Exactly.
So, and to avoid being locked up, we're going to take a break here, friends. Nomo contendere, as our Vice President Spiro Agnew said, as he received $200,000 under the table. Some of the history of Maryland here, and we're going to take our break here. And when we come back, we're going to ask Logan for we'll begin with her on the best evidence for the paranormal or psi phenomena. We'll get the best. I'll be back here on 21st Century Radio with Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. No, Yonavjak. Something. Look. This incarnation, I didn't take French, and enough, that is. So there's my excuse there. The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. Start your books, Robert Schoch, SCHOCH.com. Hike!
This is Dr. Sally Ryan Feather, the daughter of Dr. J.B. and Louisa Ryan that started the ESP research at Duke University. And I have just appeared on the Bob Hieronymus show. I think this kind of radio does so much for the public. It brings them information where they can get no other way.
That's right. You know what the fan said in the air conditioner, don't you? Said, oh, yeah, I'm not going to say it. No. This is 21st Century Radio, and our guests are Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. The Parapsychology Revolution is the book. Yeah, we've said it 14 times, but we want you to get a copy of this book. It's Rules and Regulations 506 of the Penal Code. It's just that simple. All right, now, it is a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. It's published by Tarcher Books. And again, go to robertschoch.com, SCHOCH.com. Logan, would you please give us the best evidence for the paranormal or psi phenomena within the next 8 seconds?
8 seconds?
That's all you got. Come on, if you can't spit it out, then it doesn't exist.
Well, you're wasting my 8 seconds.
Oh, that's it. Time's up. All right, now, Bob, since...
You weren't kidding, were you?
Oh, I'm never kidding.
I give my time to Logan.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thanks. Well, I would say the most exciting psychic phenomena that I think Dr. Schoch and I both think is true is the spontaneous cases that we've read about, and really that started the Society for Psychical Research wanting to examine psychical phenomena is obviously from spontaneous cases, and some people even call it the natural subject matter, because it really is unique in that, spontaneous cases offer different information about the phenomena that you just can't get in the laboratory, and it's arguable that psychic phenomena are difficult to bring into the laboratory because they're difficult to put under control in the way that we usually think of scientific phenomena. And so I would say a lot of the authentic spontaneous cases give some of the best subject matter, and they're the most intriguing. And in terms of the experimental work, I would point first to Dr. J.B. Rhine's work with the card-guessing experiments. And essentially, the most well-known card-guessing experiments stem from the Zener cards, which are those wacky symbols that a lot of people may have been exposed to. They've got the cross and the wavy lines and the star and the circle and square.
You got them.
What he would do is have people guess in 25 trials of just guessing to see which card they would pick from the 5 symbols. And by chance, it would be 5 that you would choose out of 25. But it turned out that over many, many trials, it became statistically significant, whereas people would usually guess more than 5 over many, many trials. And that seems to be pretty solid evidence that there was something going on. And then the second work that I would point to would be the pair laboratory research, which is more PK, again, the mind over matter. This is called micro PK. And what the pair laboratory did over the course of 30 years of work is work with random event generators. And what random event generators do is you have a random event generator generating a series of binary numbers 0 and 1 on a random basis continuously. And they'll have a subject trying to influence the pattern of 1s and 0s that turn up. And over the course of millions of trials, they had a statistically significant number of people be able to influence the random event generator to not be random, in that they were able to make it have more 0s or more 1s than it would normally on its own. So those 2 experiments, I would say, are the most convincing in terms of experimental work.
Well, they certainly are. And one of the problems, of course, is in this particular area of research is a lack of money to continue research.
Right.
This is really crazy because this is some of the most important knowledge on the planet today. And we just can't get the big corporations to come in and put down a couple $1 million so these things can continue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's actually, someone did research how much money has actually been put into parapsychology, and I think by 1983, the equivalent amount of money that has gone into parapsychology as opposed to psychology is 2 months worth of research money. So basically, so much money, only 2 months worth of research money has gone into parapsychology as psychology has had over the course of like 100 years. So there really is no funding.
Yeah, basically 100 years worth of parapsychological funding is equivalent to 2 months or so in normal psychology. It's just incredible. It's actually absolutely amazing that as much research has been done in parapsychology given the lack of funding.
Well, do you think that it sounds like a bunch of politicians are handling all this? Because I'm afraid they don't want people to know this stuff.
I think there's both a sort of a fear and repulsion, and also on several levels. I mean, one, people are just indoctrinated that this can't be, and then I think there's a real fear that what if it is the case? I mean, people all of a sudden think mind control, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, yeah, there's a lot we could say about that, but we don't have enough time. We have too many other things we need to cover. But I do want to mention that fact that, but then again, there are such things as you mentioned, fraud. And one of the things I enjoyed about reading as various aspects of the book dealt with finding out that there were Rhine-type card calling experiments that were fraudulent in the sense that there was decks of these cards that were created so that you could cheat.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another problem. There's been explicit fraud, and that's a whole complex psychological problem in itself. Why people commit fraud. I think it has to do with people wanting attention to themselves. Certainly, I hate to say, but the paranormal seems to attract certain people are attracted to the paranormal, that they can take advantage of pretending or being fraudulent, being charlatans, and playing on people's gullibility.
Well, what if?
But you have that in every field, unfortunately.
Oh, certainly you do. But what if you've got to perform on stage every night,
exactly,
and you just ain't got it that night?
That's right.
I don't think you're going to say to the folks out there, "I ain't got it tonight, friend." So
no,
hang it up. I think that's where sometimes.
I think that you're definitely right. That's where it comes in a lot.
And I've talked with Ingo Swann about it, Uri Geller about it, and a number of other individuals.
Exactly.
Not that they do that; it's just that they've related to me. Because this work can get boring. It really can.
I wanted to draw attention.
Well, you're going to have to draw attention to it as soon as we get back, dear, because I've wiped out all the hour here. We'll be back with our guests, Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. And the book is called The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. It's published by Tarcher Books. Go to robertschoch.com. And our executive producer and research assistant, who has pushed me down the steps 15 to 20 times in this incarnation to make sure we get this book done and I get myself out the door to get that biofuel into the Founding Fathers art car. That's Laura Kortner. And Jake Bryant, he's the guy that defends me. Guys need defense these days. Women know too much about the rabbit punch or the old 1-2. She knows how to give you the old 1-2. And, we're talking about an important book here tonight. Yes, we are. And it's a book called The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research by Tarcher Books. And it's by Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. Hey, did our engineer get his Jimi Hendrix book? He did. Okay. And if we had our engineer on the radio right now, he'd tell you just how great that Jimi Hendrix book is. Yes, indeed. Jimi Hendrix, he would love this stuff. Too bad Jimmy's not alive now. The limited conversations that we had, unfortunately, didn't get enough into the paranormal. They just got into UFOs and the reverse of the Great Seal and the Pyramid, the Eye in the Triangle, and Atlantis. That's the kind of stuff he was interested in, reincarnation. He took it for granted that there was such thing as psi and that kind of thing. Now, since everyone knows that they got to be dressed up, what do you guys think about our? What do you guys think about our way of making sure that our listeners are some of the sharpest dressers in the planet?
Oh,
I think it's very important how you dress when you're on the radio.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely,
it is. It has. What were you going to say there, Bob?
No, I was going to say you have to look good on the radio.
You got to.
You got to.
If you don't, it's too embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, animals. Bob, do the animals show any evidence of psi?
Oh yeah. In fact, I in some ways another important, I would say very important line of evidence for psi is among animals, because one thing about animals is, as far as we know, they tend not to cheat and lie and
Maybe no. Wait a second, Bob. Maybe some of your animals don't cheat and lie, but we've got 7 dogs, and I'll tell you,
they cheat and lie all the time.
Well,
when you try to test them for psi, they conspire among themselves, and
Well, they can't even hold the cards right. Have you noticed that? That's one of the biggest
that is
problems.
a problem with them. They keep flipping them over.
But they really do have.
There's
some
a lot
ability
of studies. Rupert Sheldrake, and in fact, Logan's done some experiments, not with animals, but with other things with Rupert Sheldrake. But Rupert Sheldrake has done, for instance, a lot of studies of a parrot, of dogs, that, as they say, seem to know when their masters are coming back. And we're not talking about, the person is coming back every night at 5 p.m. We're talking about, extended periods of time. There's no way for the animal to know, based on normal means, when the person's coming back, yet they'll go to the door, no one in the room, no one there, expects the person back. The animal will insist. It's just remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of suggestion that animals, or at least certain animals, really have, how should we say, they don't have the same preconceptions about psi, about paranormal events. They don't have the same fear of it. In fact, they may have it better developed than many humans. I don't know, maybe Logan wants to add to that.
Wait, before she does, Logan, would you add something about dolphins and porpoise, because they changed my life?
Well, I don't have any specific animal experiments that I know of dealing with dolphins, though I'm sure people have had interesting experiences with them. But maybe you'd like to share because you brought it up.
Well, they did change my life. I was one of those guys that actually believed that animals were things. Can you believe that, really? I mean,
they were things?
They were things. They were things that you fed, and
right.
They ran around outside, they didn't come in a house,
right.
And one of them, when they broke legs and had big problems, you threw them out, really sensitive kind of stuff here. But animals obviously are a lot more, as we've covered on this program for the last 20 years, with various animal psychics, some accurate, some not necessarily so accurate.
Right. Oh, there's some people that seem to, and I'm convinced of this actually in a few cases, anecdotally, people I've known personally that seem to be able to, should we say, communicate with animals psychically. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least pick up things from them. I was going to say, I also want to throw out, before you get to the porpoises, sometimes something known as animal trailing. Logan, is that the correct term?
It's side trailing.
Side trailing in animals. That's what I meant. Side trailing, where, a classic case of an animal that is lost thousands of miles away from its home. It can figure out how to get back. I mean, how does it do that?
Yeah, well, how does it do that?
Things like that. But go ahead, porpoises.
Well, porpoises changed my life because when I found out that they may be as intelligent as humans,
more intelligent than some humans,
or more so. I can think of some political folks right now that absolutely, really, they are far more intelligent than them. They certainly would have made better decisions about rock and all that kind of stuff. Yes, indeed, but I could not believe it. Of course, at first, the work of Lilly, I think his name was John Lilly, and others. I mean, this was really scary stuff. I thought we were the king of the planet, king of the universe, and all of a sudden to have a porpoise really being at the top head of the class certainly squelched my ego there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we couldn't.
Yeah, I was going to say not just porpoises, but a lot of the large sea mammals. I mean, the cetaceans, sperm whales, for instance, or.
Wait, I don't know if you can say that on a radio.
Oh God, yeah, I'm sorry.
Well,
you'll
I
have to bleep it out or something.
Okay.
But beluga whales, for instance. I mean, a lot of that group. They're just incredibly intelligent, and also, if you think about how far they migrate on a regular basis, or just travel on a regular basis.
Well, the thing is that it seems that they seem to be conscious of much larger parts of our universe than I ever thought. And it's unfortunate. And I'm glad now that the Navy can't keep on doing their sound testing and destroying them. Oh, we didn't do anything. They're just 400 beached whales over there. We had nothing to do with it. It's like those wrestlers. Remember the wrestlers in the ring every time? And then they catch them and they throw their hands up and say, nope, I ain't got nothing in my hands. I mean, that's the kind of thing it reminds me. So I'm glad the Navy can't do that. At least legally they're not. But that doesn't mean they're going to not do it. What about plants? Logan?
Well, this researcher named Cleve Baxter has done some work with plants, and it's called biocommunication. And essentially, he hooked up lie detector to a plant and was trying to test whether or not the plant responded to threatening thoughts about essentially whether or not the plant was being threatened by the human. So he would think to himself, I'm going to burn your leaf, and the plant would register on the lie detector. And he didn't really know how that was occurring necessarily, but actually before the show, Dr. Schoch and I were postulating whether or not that might have just been him affecting the apparatus himself through some form of PK. That was just something we were tossing around, but it's unclear whether or not that's legitimate. But then again, it's also very interesting evidence. So maybe Dr. Schoch has more to say about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Logan just brought up a much larger issue, which is a thorny issue for paranormal research. In many cases, you have a situation where you have very well-designed experiments, you get really nice results with one experimenter, but then another experimenter gets no results. And why is that? Is it because the experiment, when you're talking about something like psi and paranormal phenomena, there may be a very large component coming from the individual who's running the experiment. So that's another complicating factor, which certainly doesn't negate the phenomenon at all. In fact, that's exactly what you would expect rationally if these are, given that these are phenomena generated essentially by consciousness, if I could use that term.
No, you can't use that term here. No, we're not.
Okay.
No, you got to watch your language around
but
here.
there is a lot of evidence, and the Baxter-type effects have been repeated consistently by other researchers, where it seems that plants do have some level of, at least one interpretation is that they have some level of awareness, should we say.
Brother Clive has been doing this a long time.
He has. He first did this in the 60s. He discovered it by accident. He was actually originally just, I think, playing around.
Well, he originally just attached a GSR, which is a galvanic skin response, to the leaf of a plant, and he was not doing this to search for psi, but to see if watering the plant, as the water rose to the stem into the leaf, he was just doing another experiment and essentially kind of came across this idea of, or came across the psi experiment. But I wanted to just add that maybe even if plants, because plants don't have nervous systems, other more organized forms of life may be exhibiting this type of response. But I'm just not sure if it's plants per se. But
well, I am.
Well, if you sure.
Well, it's my show. Of course, yeah. No, but I apologize. Obviously, I'm kidding. I was thinking about a dear friend of mine who was the best man of our wedding, Christopher Bird and Peter Tompkins.
Right.
These guys.
Yeah, sure.
We used to. We had a member. We had a secret society, and I'm going to announce it on the air. Yes, we did, and we had the Order of the Paper Clip. And we would cause havoc at New Age functions.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, we would. We would, because we were skeptical.
Sure.
And we were very skeptical about all of these different experiences, and we would go in and we would do a nice job of skepticism rather than the psychopian.
Right,
job,
exactly.
which is just slander, no matter what.
That's just slander, and that's to put it crudely, they lie.
They lie. That's right. And thank God for Marcello, Dr. Truzzi.
Exactly.
And I am so glad you put him in your
Oh,
your
he
book.
was wonderful.
Yes, he was.
Truzzi, yeah.
He would be one of the first to say, these guys are, he'd be very nice every time we had gatherings, and he would be, he's a very polite man.
Right.
But at the same time, he'd call them when they were caught in some type of a lie, and that goes back to the 60s. Even when we used to have the Order of the Paperclip meeting between myself, Peter Tompkins, and Chris Bird, we talk about how they were literally just going after personalities because they weren't going after the research. They didn't do the research.
No, they didn't do the research. In fact, they would make their careers just attacking other people.
How can you say that?
No, No, I take it back. Sorry.
Okay, good. It's a good
We got to
thing
keep
to
this
do.
show clean.
Yeah, we got to. And now, since we get into this aspect of what's so good, I almost slipped into an Italian incarnation. So what's so good? What's so good about the paranormal? Why can it be used for anything practical, or is this just pie in the sky? Oh Lord, pie in the. Get that one? Hey, did you get that one, Logan? The pie in the sky one?
I got that.
Yeah, but what about psi? And psi or pie in the sky, or phi in the sky? But anyway, is there any?
Deserves a big sigh.
I apologize, friends, but the reason why I'm enjoying myself so much is because over the years, I'm trying to think how long we've talked on the radio.
I don't know. It's been
91, 90,
yeah, something
91?
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I've known this man and I have never met him.
That's true.
This is crazy.
Just over the radio.
Yeah.
But I assure you, I'm up to dress code.
Well, you wouldn't be on this show without it. Let me tell you, we look into those things very carefully. We borrowed a few instruments from the CIA, and we can see everything you're wearing. Now,
You're there by remote viewing.
Yeah,
I'll let Logan talk about that.
Leads us into our practical uses of paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, Logan, let's get to some of those. Come on.
Well, I would like to talk about remote viewing just because it's interesting from more of a general public perspective. The CIA actually poured a lot of money into researching the practical implications of paranormal phenomena based on some of the work that the Soviets were doing back in the 1960s, and they were concerned that they were gaining an edge on harnessing the potential quote-unquote power of paranormal phenomenon. So they actually launched a program that lasted 30 years, and their main research was looking into remote viewing, which is essentially clairvoyance, which is seeing at a distance. And this is gaining information about a location or person, but not through telepathic means. So essentially, they had a few people see if they could, for example, locate the or see what was going on in a particular location in terms of if weaponry was being made at a particular location, or if a person could gain access about secret information that may not be visible from a satellite or was not visible. So for 30 years, the CIA looked into remote viewing and its implications, and there were some interesting results from that.
Yeah, they certainly had some success with locating Saddam Hussein.
Exactly. They had an incredible amount of success. And we mentioned Ingo Swann before. He was involved in that, as you know.
He was one of the first people involved as a viewer.
He was kind of like my teacher, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Except that's why I kept giving him cigars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure I got an A.
That's right.
It's the best way.
But I mean, the fact that the military and the CIA and the Defense Department, they were pouring money into this, and they were getting results and information that they couldn't get otherwise through remote viewing. Eventually, they gave it up. I think and went more high tech. Putting more emphasis on satellites and I guess their 100% accurate information on weapons of mass destruction in certain countries.
Mm-hmm.
But
well,
we know where that led them.
Well, I wish we had more time. 3 needed 5 hours. I can see that right now, and it's all my fault. Actually, it's not. It's your fault. It's never my fault. It's never the host's fault.
Do you want to continue with some practical studies? I mean,
well, we'd like to, but we got to take a break here.
Okay.
Got to take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up a few more practical studies. Then we'll talk about the reincarnation and life after death. And my favoriteest person in the whole world in this particular research was Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. Anybody who's related to Virginia, as far as I'm concerned, should be given about the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the Nobel Peace Prize state, so to speak, as far as 21st Century Radio is concerned. We'll be back with our guests, Robert and Logan, and the book is, that's it, The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research, published by Tarcher Books, Robert Schoch schoch.com, or go to 21stcenturyradio.com and click on this week's show at the top.
Hello, I'm Dean Radin, author of Entangled Minds, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
This is 21st Century Radio. I'm the alleged Dr. Bob Hieronymus, and our guests are Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon, yes. And the book is The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research, torture books. And I'm certain that Psychical would want to ban this book, but we're going to allow you to hear her talk about it anyway. And you can go to robertschoch.com, Robert Schoch, that is, .com, SCHOCH.com, or go to 21stcenturyradio.com and click on this week's show at the top right-hand corner. Now, we were talking about practical uses of paranormal phenomena, and I do believe I saw Robert's hand go up just as we were about ready to take a break there. Robert, did you have something to say to the class?
Yeah, I'm glad you saw that. That was your remote viewing.
That's right. I did a lot of training.
That's right. No, I mean, it does have practical uses. I was going to say the other practical uses that really have gotten some publicity, should we say, or are known, are uses in healing studies, remote healing studies. Mm-hmm. We have Larry Dossey wrote an article just for this book on that for us, summarizing a lot of evidence, numerous very well credentialed individuals carrying out blind studies on the possibility or the use of, sometimes people refer to as prayer, but more than that, healing from a distance. I'll use that term.
Yeah, we'll allow that.
That it really does have an effect. It really does have a positive effect. Now, how exactly that's working, what the underlying causes are, is another question, but it's been verified many times.
Dr. Dossey, or not, sometimes I used to call him Dosey, and I don't think you'd like that. Has joined us a number of times, and I just think his work is extraordinary. Over the past 15, 20 years. That's what is so amazing to me. There are so many important researchers nowadays in comparison back to the 60s when it seemed like we were sitting around in a paper bag or something.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of work being done on this, but, you mentioned people like the debunkers, psychops, and whatnot. They, I think, more than anything else, they don't want to admit that there are serious people doing serious research that's above, it's above criticism, really, much of it.
Well, I believe
talk about that too, and then when you look at, you apply the same statistics to the parapsychological research as is applied to other types of scientific research, and it comes out very well in favor of the paranormal. I mean, if we had the same evidence, or when we have the same evidence for other types of phenomena, there's no question that they're accepted as real.
That's true. Yeah. True.
I was going to say real quickly, I wanted to mention, and this ties in with the healing, but at a different level, and Logan may want to join in on this too, is something I think that's very important is the paranormal phenomena on a personal level in particular, I think probably serve therapeutic, psychological types of functions, bonding functions between, say, married couples or family members, that type of thing. And I don't think that should be, I think that needs to be acknowledged, that this is very important. And it's a shame that much of the conventional medical community doesn't acknowledge such things. Or, in fact, if you look at things like the straight conventional psychological literature, people that claim to have paranormal experiences, that can actually be used against them to make out that they're somehow, I hate to use the term, but crazy, or that they're suffering from some kind of detrimental mental problem.
Well, if we're still around,
that's the level we're at. It's almost like witch hunting.
It is witch hunting.
That someone can have a valid paranormal experience, and certain, and again, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent here, but certain people in the conventional medical profession are so ignorant, I would say, this is me speaking, so ignorant of such things that they actually use that as evidence to diagnose pathology in them.
Correct. Yes, indeed.
I mean, it's insane.
Well, I think that'll change in about 20 years.
I hope.
Well, it will, because I believe what's happening in all these areas is the scientific evidence is growing so strong over a period of time that it's going to be, I don't think they're going to be able to change it. I believe that Psychop is going to go out of business.
I certainly hope so. And I mean, yeah, and it's growing, and I agree with you, it's growing, and that's despite the lack of funding, that's despite
right.
the suppression, that's despite people like Psychops who are actively trying to belittle it and, just name-calling and lying and, I mean, the tactics they use are just...
They're abysmal.
Yeah,
they really are. I've seen it in person, and we aren't going to spend any more time on that. Now,
but people have to be aware of it because, I mean, they do have a public forum, and they unfortunately, I think, do a decent job of getting their message out, of harassing and making fun of anyone dealing with the paranormal.
That's right.
I think it's important that people realize what and who they really are.
They have more than a forum.
Yeah.
They have literally friends. I'm sure, Bob, you've been on a lot of different television shows and networks and that kind of thing, and you will see this repeatedly over and over and over again, that those people who produce some of the shows that I've been on History Channel, on Discovery Channel, on National Geographic Channel, they are literally forced to bring in the other side.
Exactly.
And I don't care about the other side from the standpoint if they are skeptical, but these guys aren't skeptical.
They're not skeptical.
They're what would you call them?
They're debunkers is one term we use.
Well, they're worse
I mean,
than
they passionately. I mean, they're fundamentalists.
Correct.
They passionately believe what they believe, and they close their minds to everything else.
Has nothing to do with science.
Exactly, and that's something that we talk about in the book, and Truzzi talks about in the article that we have from him. And, in fact, something that a term we use to try to distinguish this is true skepticism versus the skeptics with a capital S, who are not skeptics at all, but simply people who have their own very strong beliefs, and their basic belief is there can be nothing valid among paranormal phenomena.
Reincarnation and life after death. Logan, you want to begin with this one? Logan?
I'm going to defer to him on that one.
Oh, you're okay.
Oh, you want to defer that to me?
She's deferring her payment.
Well, I'll start and then let Logan join in. I mean, something you mentioned was Ian Stevenson, who just he's unfortunately has passed away now recently.
Yeah, he certainly has.
Yeah, but he did for decades incredible amount of work, really documenting cases of what he referred to as, by different terms, but apparent cases of incarnations, reincarnation, and his typical cases where the most classic case that he would document would be where he had a young child, and many of the cases were from places like India, Burma, etc. Interestingly, places where reincarnation is more acceptable, perhaps for religious reasons or mainstream, among mainstream members of those particular societies, but where children would apparently remember past lives very early on, and then talk about it. In some cases, and I find this incredible, and we talk about it in the book, children would actually show physical traits or characteristics that seem to correspond to the previous life, and they would talk about it. In many cases, apparently they were incarnations of someone who had died within just a few years of when they were born. In many cases, from, say, another village within a couple of 100 miles. So it seemed to be a fairly localized thing in many instances that he documented. But what that meant is that he was able to track down, he was able to apparently track down the identities of the former incarnations. Meticulously researched, and I think makes a very strong case. At least something is going on there. Now, whether this is traditional, in my own opinion, whether this is traditional reincarnation that the traditional concept that some people carry in their heads of everyone being totally reincarnated, that's questionable, but certainly he's opening the gates, he's opening the possibilities of something happening there, some kind of information being passed on from a deceased person to a new living person.
Well, you can imagine how I felt when I first bumped into that little booklet, 20 cases of suggested reincarnation.
Oh, God, the classic, that came out in the 60s.
Yeah. It just ripped me to pieces. All of a sudden, absolutely. I realized I thought I knew I thought I knew everything.
Right. Oh no, but you knew everything but that. Now you know everything.
Yeah, well, almost. Yeah, I mean, but it's just amazing to me. And then, of course, I tried to share that with my friends at Hopkins. No way.
Oh no
way,
they won't. I don't know if you had the experience. I'll have the experience with things like that. They won't even look at it.
Oh yes, of course.
They won't even look at it. It's like it reminds me of the classic story of Galileo in the 1600s, early 1600s, and people refused to look through the telescope.
Well, what about the time when they decided that the only way to count the teeth in the horse's mouth is to open their mouth? That took decades, centuries.
Exactly.
It took centuries, friends. We're not kidding. I mean, they discussed this philosophically, and someone said, "Well, why don't we open the mouth
the mouth and count them?"
No, lock that kid up. We don't want that. We got
But that's the thing with studies like by Stevenson in particular. It's so meticulous,
Yeah.
Yeah.
He really laid the foundation, and his works that came. I mean, there are so many publications that come out. The 2-volume set. Well, we can't. We'll hold them up to the microphone another time.
Right.
Now we need to take our final break on 21st Century Radio, and we will be back with Dr. Robert Schoch and Logan Yonaviakon. Yonavjak, yes, almost got it right there. The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. Start your books, robertschoch.com, or go to 21stcenturyradio.com and click on this week's show at the top right-hand corner.
Hello, this is Uri Geller, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
I'm what's left of Dr. Bob Hieronymus in this incarnation. Yes, it's true. I'm just a lowly PhD, but that's the way it goes. Took 5.5 years, and I don't know how many bucks to get it, but, that's the way it goes. Now, our guests are Robert and Logan, and their last names are secret. We're keeping them secret because we don't want them beat up as they leave the studio tonight. We got a lot of psychopians out there who like to get their hands on these folks. And the book is called The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research published by Tarcher Books. And please go to Robert Schoch, SCHOCH.com to check the oil, as we used to say. And in the limited time that we got, if paranormal phenomena are real, what accounts for them? Who would like to take them on this? Would you like to start with this, Logan?
I'll start by saying that when it comes right down to it, I think there is no clear theory of psi at this point in time, but I do think that, and many others think that this doesn't mean it should be rejected, and that just means that we don't have a clear understanding of its parameters, but that it shouldn't be dismissed as a very, very important line of inquiry and something that has large implications for our understanding of the world and of our interactions with others and of ourselves. So, but in terms of there are several theories out there, and Robert will talk about those a little more.
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a really good question. In fact, that's one of the classic questions that's proposed by the debunkers, and they think they've got you when they say, well, what accounts for it if it's real? And there's no universal answer. What they seem to forget is there's lots of phenomena in science that we really don't know what the underlying mechanism of the phenomenon is. In fact, when it comes right down to it, if you even think about gravity, there's still a lot of arguments as to what causes gravity. Are they gravitons, or is it a warping of space-time, et cetera? I mean, theories for phenomena come and go. That being said, I would say that really the two most popular theories for the physical basis of psi right now are variations either on quantum mechanical theory. Well, actually, I'll say the three most popular ones, either quantum mechanical theory, thermal fluctuations that may be causing it, or various forms of electromagnetic theory. So the question really is, how can this information and potential energy be transmitted through channels that are not among the known senses, that are not among sort of classical physics as we now know them. But as we learn, for instance, more about quantum physics, we know of concepts like non-locality, entanglement. In fact, you just gave away a book that uses that term in the title, Entangled Minds. In the anthology, we have a couple of pieces, one by Paul Stevens that reviews the major theories for trying to account for psi phenomena. And we also have an article by the physicist Gene Burns, who really discusses this whole issue of what are the physical aspects of psi that we need to account for in any theory, how might various theories account for it, particularly quantum mechanical theories. And I'd point out that Brian Josephson, for instance, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, has come out very strongly in a number of papers suggesting that quantum mechanical theory may, in fact, elucidate a lot of psi phenomena, and even to the point he and others have suggested that by certain interpretations of quantum physics, you would actually predict certain types of psi phenomena, and then go searching for them, even if we didn't know about them already. The bottom line is, I don't think I think we're actually getting closer and closer to having a comprehensive theory of what may be causing these.
Well, there are a lot of things that I found very impressive in this book, and I was so glad to catching up on the late John Beloff, and I've never.
Oh yes, he's wonderful.
And I think I started with the relentless. Was that the relentless question? Yes, that's right. It was the relentless question.
That's right.
1990.
That's right.
And so, but I very much enjoyed reading this again because, friends, this is not like it didn't happen 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. It's been going on for decades. Now he has some basic approaches to positions that have been taken toward the paranormal phenomena, which I'd like to go down.
Sure.
Now, there were 5 of them, and I think we have enough time to cover this.
Yeah.
So, would you like to start with that, Rob, and then we'll ask Logan?
Yeah, you want me to pick up with that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one, and this is the classic psychop position, if you would, is total disbelief. And even to the point, many of the debunkers and whatnot, they even are to the point where they won't look at the evidence, basically. They just know that the paranormal doesn't exist, and essentially, and they've said this in print, they have had the audacity to suggest that there's no such thing as the paranormal. There can be no evidence for the paranormal. Anyone that claims they have evidence for the paranormal is either really naive and stupid and being duped, or they're a charlatan themselves. And, they've even suggested that, if you have a bunch of people working in a lab supposedly producing paranormal results, they must all be in on it.
Well, of course they
are.
It's
just ridiculous. Of course.
It's their brothers and sisters, they're brothers and sisters doing books and papers. They want them to sell, so they got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all these parapsychologists make so much money off of it.
Well, I'm making money hand over fist, let me tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So total disbelief is
so that's
the
a very classic one, and basically, it's closing your mind to it, and you just won't even look at the evidence. Then the next one, which I find quite amazing too, is we coined the term paranormal insignificance. And this is the position that Beloff talks about, and actually William James even suggested, apparently in jest, back in the late 19th century, and that's the concept that, okay, the evidence for paranormal phenomena is overwhelming, so instead of just dismissing it, you just sort of wave your hands and say it's not important.
Yeah.
You know, hell, it happens once in a blue moon. Something happens. Okay, we'll admit that it really does happen. It really is genuine, but it's not important. It doesn't really change our view of the world. It doesn't change our view of nature. It's totally dismissive. And, you know, in any other scientific field, any other endeavor, you couldn't get away with that type of attitude.
You could.
I mean, you couldn't get away with either of these attitudes.
I know, but they do.
It's really ridiculous.
And the media just allows them to keep on and doesn't question them. That's what I found so despicable. The media is so ignorant and arrogant in this area.
Exactly.
They already assume that these guys have to be right because they're so-called skeptics. There's a certain skeptical, but that obviously we don't believe that skepticism at all. At least I don't, and I know you don't either.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I'd say that most people start and stop, or are never even exposed to the idea, so they just linger in total disbelief, or they just don't understand. They think of, you know, just UFOs or crop circles, or they add all these different phenomena into the mix or the pot of what they think of as paranormal. So they're just confused and don't even know. They don't even go there. So I think that's where most of the general public lingers in terms of their understanding of paranormal phenomena or their belief in paranormal phenomena.
Oh, exactly. And tie in with what Logan was saying, even the psychops people who, you know, they claim they're so bright and they're above everyone else, they will, in many cases, they will lump a whole bunch of things together, including a bunch of studies, etc. Then they'll point to one study that they disagree with, or one study where maybe everyone admits there was fraud involved, and they'll use that as an excuse to dismiss everything else. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just dishonest.
That's their tradition, all right. Now, scientific monism is the third.
Scientific monism, yeah, and that ties in. We might as well talk with maybe both quickly. Substantial dualism, and the first scientific monism is that if there are paranormal phenomena, and if they're real, eventually we're going to have to, or we will be able to incorporate them into traditional science, or maybe we extend traditional science to incorporate the paranormal phenomena. One way we might see that to a certain extent, for instance, if someone coming out of quantum physics can develop, you know, extend quantum physics or extend physics, we'll use that term, to include all paranormal phenomena, that would be essentially a form of scientific monism. And arguably, it's speculation, it might, such phenomena may start being accepted more widely if, in fact, there's a good theory behind them that ties in with scientific monism, just in the sense that it's appealing to many conventional scientists that science should be unified.
Well, the fourth, since we've got about 2 or 3 minutes
left,
the
fourth is substantial dualism, where there's basically accepting that paranormal are real, but there may actually be a dualism between the physical sciences, and what we could call consciousness, or psychic mental sciences.
Almost a different order of reality.
Exactly, 2 different orders of reality.
That parallels the physical reality.
The physical and the mental or spiritual consciousness. And many people along these lines actually suggesting that the consciousness comes first, is prior.
Yeah.
It's primary. And in matter and material world that we're so familiar with is actually outgrowth of consciousness.
The last is the theory of synchronicity. We got about a minute to cover this. This is my favorite topic.
Yeah. Synchronicity is basically, there's no easy way to summarize in 1 minute. It's basically that there are correspondences, meaningful correspondences between different aspects of the world. And when I say the world, I mean in the most broad sense.
The outer world.
The inner world, the outer world, consciousness in the physical world, consciousness between different individuals. Now, importantly, Carl Jung was very much a promoter of this view, and his own research gives a lot of support to this meaningfulness. And this actually goes back to the ancient concept of as above, so below, as within the microcosm, so in the macrocosm. So really stressing the unity of the cosmos, including humans as part of that.
Well, guys, this is an important work. I hope that you'll get a call from George Norrie and Shirley MacLaine to come on their show. We'll drop them a note suggesting that this is really an important work here. It's called The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of the paranormal and psychical research, Tarcher Books. Go to the website Robert Schoch, SCHOCH.com. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronymus and Company. Our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner. And I'm Dr. Bob Hieronymus. And remember to sit up straight.